we have people do all kinds of crazy things to get customers taken care of. And I know a lady was in the checkout line at Walmart and her debit card wouldn't work one day, and a lady that runs our debit card department got the cash out of her account for her with the customer's permission, of course, and drove that to Walmart and delivered it to the customer. I mean, we just do whatever it takes to get the customer taken care of, and I think that's unique in today's banking environment.
Here on Wednesday, October 19, 2011. There are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of the 7 of us present, so a quorum is present to conduct business here today. I want to thank the board members and our guests and the media for their attendance here today and everyone's continuing interest in the work of this local government corporation, and in particular the work to develop and redevelop downtown Amarillo. The first item of business for consideration before the body today is item number 2 on the agenda, the approval of the minutes from our previous meeting.
Mr. Chairman, before we get to the minutes, can I ask a question?
Sure.
Is seating predetermined, or are we free to sit anywhere we want to?
I think you're free to sit anywhere you want.
Okay, in this room. Okay, in this room. Okay.
In the hallway or something, probably not.
I requested it on the schedule.
You may proceed, Mr. President. You've answered. I relinquish the rest of it.
You know, I feel something like a first grade teacher. The 2 boys over here don't seem to be getting along very well.
He started.
I suggest we cancel recess. Not go to the playground today.
Okay, Mr. Chairman, I'm on. At future meetings, I'll be habitually late so that I can see what I should say.
That would be fashionably late. All right, having carried all those things, we'll get back to the minutes. You received electronically the copy of our minutes from September 21st. Are there any additions, deletions, or corrections to consider to those minutes?
I move for their approval.
I have one correction. Item 3, I think, refers to phase 11, which is somewhat intimidating. We should do phase 2.
Supposed to be 2.
So noted.
Any other? Thank you. No, it's been moved that the minutes be approved with the correction as noted. Is there a second? Second. Been moved and seconded. The minutes be approved with the correction as noted. Those in favor of such indicate so by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed, minutes stand approved. You know, Richard, I had a board member for many years over the Planning Commission that's the mayor of the city of Spearman, Texas. And inevitably, as hard as we tried as staff to get the minutes perfect, or that we have a question about the vouchers that month, inevitably we had an issue. So as he retired from the board, we manufactured a 6-foot red pencil. Presented a 6-foot red pencil to Mayor Burl Buchanan of the city of Spearman. We might have to consider a red pencil before we're done with this SBC. We appreciated the mayor.
How long did he serve?
He served a long time. All right, item number 3 on the agenda. Today's meeting is the first meeting of the fiscal year, and we are on the city's fiscal year, which begins October 1st. And this meeting has been structured to serve not only as a regular meeting of the body, but also as the corporation's annual meeting as prescribed and called for in our bylaws. And in that annual meeting context, we have a couple of housekeeping chores to consider under item number 3. One being the election of officers, and 2 being the approval of the investment policy for the organization for the 2011-2012 year. So let's talk about the election of officers. First of all, these are for 1-year terms, I believe. We elected officers upon our organization back in April, May, sometime, to get us through this year, or the last year, the beginning of the new year here today. So we need to consider the election of officers. There are 4 positions. The secretary and treasurer positions can be filled by those other than board members. The vice president and president obviously are filled by one of the 7 members of this body. I haven't listed with Richard. I'm hopeful that he's willing to continue to serve as a I'm willing to concur, sir, if that be the desire of the company. So I'll open the floor for a discussion related to the election of officers.
Mr. President, I would move Gary Pittner for president, Richard Brown for vice president, Dean Frigo for the treasurer, and Donna DeWright as the secretary.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? The motion and the second that slate of officers be elected here today. Those in favor of that motion indicate so by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? So be it. Thank you. The next item of consideration as an annual meeting item is the approval of the investment policy. We did adopt an investment policy back in spring on May the 4th. We have a modified investment policy for our consideration here today. Dean's not with us, so Jared, you want to touch on the tweaks? There's some tweaks.
Tweaks primarily are to line this back up with this year, which we need to do. Would also note that it is likely that over the next few months there will be further tweaks that need to be brought forward as a result of legislation in the most recent session. The group of government accountants and report have not quite formulated how best yet to ripple that out, so that will affect city policy, like the PRPCs and others. So we will bring that forward at the time, but it won't sort of affect it to change forward to modify the dates. We're doing very much you have before you today gets us on the path that we need to do.
Anyone have questions about the proposed corporate investment policy included in here?
I didn't lay this one down beside the one that we approved back in May, but I'm assuming since there's no, nothing shows indicates change, this is.
Got a couple of questions. Sorry, Dean's not here, so I'm going to have to disadvantage I know some of this is general and some of this is specific to OBC, and I'm not exactly sure where the break is, but it's called random questions. And this is paragraph under reserve capital, paragraph 3. To me, this doesn't read correctly because there's a laundry list of investments there. It doesn't really say why they're there, but I think the concept is we're not going to invest in those things. So in my mind, that there should be a colon after will not invest in that investigation. That percentage should be removed.
Bottom of page 3.
Oh,
Just below the middle of the page.
I'll walk around and show you what to do.
Reserve capital, the local government corp will not invest in these securities inherently. He's suggesting this concept will not invest in them.
It doesn't really say why this stuff is here. I think these are things we're not supposed to do. I think we just need a colon there.
I see no issue with approving that change if you want to know. On page 3, paragraph 3, the suggestion is to make that sentence read, as reserve capital, the Amarillo Local Government Corporation will not invest in, strike the remainder of the sentence.
Give that to us once more.
Paragraph 3, page 3, that header sentence would now read, to preserve capital, the Amarillo Local Government Corporation will not invest in, insert a colon, strike the remainder of the sentence.
engineering function question. In the, on page 6 on mine, I guess all of it, I'm not sure.
Should be.
At the top of the page, that's the section on reporting where the investment officers are going to tell us what's going on. And I'm not familiar with the process and how it all works. And I'm wondering if it would be possible or helpful or useful if included in this report was the requirement that the investment officers state that the anticipated maturity date of the corporation's investment portfolio will meet the anticipated cash flow requirements of the corporation under the corporation's budget.
Would you suggest modifying in
I would just
sub 4?
I would just suggest adding 7. I'm not trying to get outside the system and create problems, but I think to us, the thing that's going to matter the most is the money going to be there when we need it? Secretary for 14 years. Just sort
State the anticipated maturity date corporations invest state that. Anticipated maturity date corporations investments will meet the anticipated cash flow. Okay, President, would you like to read that? This will be on page 6. In addition, in subparagraph 7, that would read, state that the anticipated maturity date of the corporation's investments will meet the anticipated cash flow needs of the corporation.
State that the anticipated maturities
Maturity dates of the corporation's investments will meet the anticipated cash flow needs of the corporation. And as an aside, we know we've not had a quarterly report presented to you, but nor does the corporation have an investment at this point.
I guess getting away from the nits and trying to get to the concept. Most of this is financial gobbledygook to me, and I'm just trying to follow what it's going to matter from my perspective. If I'm understanding this right, almost all the corporation's money is going to be in overnight investments with very short terms. And so, even though there's some provisions in here about mutual funds and other things, we essentially in this corporation in a more narrow universe in terms of overnight securities, very short terms. And then the other is being sure I know who's who. the designated investment officers, and I couldn't link titles with bodies. Assistant City Manager of Financial Services at D. And then Finance Director.
Michelle Bonner.
And City Auditor.
Curtis Bain.
And there's some qualifications here, and I'm just assuming they've all been to their investment policy training in their current.
And in fact, some of them teach you.
I think the last question I had on this was, there is a requirement that the collateral be compared to the bank deposits daily. Who actually does that?
There's actually an automated reporting system that does that, and it's verified by one of those typically on a daily basis, as would be by Curtis or Michelle.
Jared, in practice, in terms of the quarterly reports, do you see that as a written report that would just be submitted to us?
On the maturity deal, the vast majority, certainly the city's investments are on very short periods right now as well, based on the condition of the financial market. And sometimes it's difficult to collateralize if you've got to move very far out.
Anything else regarding the investment policy? Okay, we have a policy before us for our consideration that's been tweaked as discussed.
And 2 spots ultimately, right? Richard, is that
Okay. Any other comments? Otherwise, I'll entertain a motion.
Move that the investment policy as amended be adopted.
Second.
Any discussion? Hearing none, those in favor of the motion indicate so by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, motion carries, and the investment policy for the organization has been approved as amended. Carried this morning. Moving on, item number 4 on the agenda is a resolution, and that resolution was attached. The proposed resolution was attached to the packet, and it's a resolution that amends the bylaws in a couple of areas. And as is probably not unusual, when the new organization is formed, we will have the procedures and whatnot in your bylaws, and then the reality sets in and you discover there's a better way to build a mousetrap. And so you either ignore your bylaws or you amend your bylaws in order to accommodate what is the logical practice. And I think that's what we're trying to do here today, is amend our bylaws in order for them to be more appropriate for us to conduct our business. So there are basically 2 things being addressed in the resolution amending our bylaws. The first one is articulated in Section 1 in the resolution, in Article 1, Section 8, and fundamentally it grants the President the ability to appoint advisory committees of not more than 3 directors to assist the board in conducting its business. Advisory committees shall not exercise the authority of the board, but shall study, consult, and advise the city staff and others, and, when necessary and appropriate, make recommendations to the board. The current language calls for committees to be created by resolution of this body, and also grants them the ability to act on behalf of the board, which is a bit problematic for a public organization, not problematic for a nonprofit organization. And since we're a little bit of both in dealing with that situation here, to clarify the ability to appoint an advisory committee simply to serve in that capacity, and that's an advisory capacity. Then the second portion of the amendment to Article 2, Section 10, deals with the director's reliance on consultant information from a liability standpoint. Being expanded a bit, it currently reads that a director shall not be liable if while acting in good faith and the director relies on one or more other officers or employees of the corporation, but if you pointed out appropriately so, we have no employees of the corporation, so there's not much to rely upon. So that language has been expanded to include our reliance on employees, agents, and authorized consultants of the city of Amarillo. Marcus, what else do we need to know about that resolution?
I think you covered it, Mr. President.
I had an additional question about that. In Article 2, Section, these aren't numbered at the top, but regarding the one with Article 1 and Article 2, Section 10, it says director's reliance on consulting information. The director shall not be liable if while acting in good faith. It was difficult for me to tell the way the documents read, liable to whom? Because our only responsibilities with these documents are to the rest of the local government corporation. We have no liability beyond that.
This builds that liability shield of that identification as the director's individual.
You're partly a public body, you're partly a non-profit corporation. A non-profit corporation is a corporation. You have no members of the corporation. It is a hybrid organization. So I understand your question and confusion. But under state law, it says you have to be formed as a non-profit corporation, but then it goes on to flow through certain governmental attributes. And so we're just trying to finesse it here. But you're right, it's unclear who you would be liable, other than perhaps to the city, which has delegated certain tasks to you, you go and carry those out.
Was that confusing to anybody? Okay. Thank you.
Other issues?
I would suggest change to Article 1, Section 8, the second sentence, so that instead of as written, it would be a committee designated under this Article 1, Section 8A shall act and continue as written. And this would just have the effect of clarifying clear distinction in the function of the roles of an elected committee, one responsibility versus others.
Tell me again where that would be.
In the second sentence of Article 1, Section 8.
Actually, it's the fifth one.
Okay. It's saying such committee under this subsection.
Fundamentally, that simply ties it.
It just makes it clear the difference between
An advisory committee.
A committee and B committee.
And the A committee could never be used either publicly. That's what's really odd about the way you blended, or not you, the state was blending the nonprofit laws of public authorities.
So to read that, beginning on that fifth line down, a committee formed under this subsection A shall act in the manner provided in the authorized resolution and etc.
Yeah.
You need to read that again for the members of the committee or not? For this where we are on that. Fifth line down, it will now read or is being proposed to read a committee formed under this subsection.
Subcommittee.
What we just been referred to as a committee. A committee formed under this subsection A. And then we go back to the main text, shall act in the manner provided, etc., etc. Ms. Secretary, did you get that too?
Any other thoughts? Carry it off. Corporation regarding this resolution.
Move to adopt the resolution as amended.
Second.
Discussion. Hearing none, those supportive of the motion indicate so by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Motion carries and the resolution is adopted. Okay. More housekeeping. Item number 5 is a resolution dealing with our infamous haven't yet met document development and review committee. And the resolution is intended to clarify the sort of committee that committee is intended to be as a result of the act that we just put in this. It clarifies the authority, the nature, and the role of the document development committee and makes it clear that committee is intended to be advisory in nature and the sort of committee that we just anticipated with the act that we took in our bylaws. So is that clear as mud, or do you understand what we're doing about passing?
The resolution numbers are blank, just mechanically.
I'm sorry, I forgot.
Yeah, those in.
This is, the first one was 3 and the second one's 4.
So let me ask you, is it your vision that we would appoint both committees and advisory committees?
No. The advisory committees would be appointed by the president.
That's right.
And then the committees, as contemplated in our original bylaws, would still be appointed the same way the bylaws call for. The resolution with the authority being granted to that committee by a resolution.
And we would specifically lay out what their charge was and the terms by which they brought it back.
Right. I see the advisory committees as being much more informal, much more ad hoc, single task oriented kind of committees that are not coming on. Similar to what we're talking about here. And that I think the desire was, our intent was to have a smaller group spend some meaningful time in terms of document development work before it was followed.
So advisory committees, you would envision those being set out on a particular project for a limited amount of time to report back. We can do with what we want to do.
Is that fair, Dale? How's that sound? Okay, are we comfortable with some action there? If so, we'll entertain a motion.
So moved. Second.
It's been moved and seconded with the resolution dealing with the document development and review committee cleanup. The action upon favorably. Those in favor of such indicate so by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Motion carries and that resolution is adopted. Okay, item number 6, interlocal agreement. This is an interlocal agreement between the City of Amarillo and the Amarillo Local Government Corporation. The proposed agreement is included in your packet for this week's meeting. And fundamentally, it's intended at this stage to assign budgeted city funds that were included in the current year city budget to the LGC for the purposes of the operations and work of the LGC in the implementation of the downtown redevelopment plan. Specifically, the resources in terms of the amounts are listed on that last page there. Total dollars of $71,400. It's contemplated in the budget $60,000 of those $71,400 for contractual services, which would be our legal counsel fees. You'll recall that we have engaged the services of outside legal counsel to assist us in moving down the path. So this would provide us with the city resources necessary to move forward with that relationship, plus $11,400 for, I guess, what I would categorize as some miscellaneous other kinds of contemplated expenses along the way to include, but not be limited to, our directors and officers' liability coverage, any travel that might be necessary, any reasonable appropriate travel that might be necessary along the way, and needs probably including the ones that
We'd like to thank DAI for the donation of the meal today. And in fact, since this body's met, the city's providing meal, DAI is providing meal.
And the quality has been approved by people.
We can take the notes on it. These are probably the best cookies, though.
All right. Thoughts regarding the interlocal agreement?
I have a couple of clarification changes. Page 1 under paragraph 5, LGC obligation. I suggest that we delete the letter C and have it read as it is now, including, and then insert a comment without limitation. That's just a grammatical correction. We're accepting the duties and agreeing to perform the obligations, including the limitation of paying. And then,
Now, what, would you say that again? On item C?
item C, yes,
After including, put a comma and then what?
just delete the letter C so it runs together.
Oh.
So, as stated therein, including, comma, without limitation, time and payment services. Just didn't read right. LGC hereby including. Wouldn't read right.
Can I read?
And then all the way over the last paragraph, 12 on the amendment. Third line all the way over to the right after the word modified, just insert the word only. This would have the effect of clarifying that amendments can only be right. In other words, no more amendments.
Other thoughts? Richard, anything you need to say?
Requirement to think now.
Gary, do you have anything to add as to what we're trying to accomplish with this interlocal agreement?
No, sir. I think it's been well stated. This is the mechanism to transfer the received funds to this body for its operation every evening. It's literally taking in this case.
This is a fairly common language for us. You haven't thrown anything extra in there.
Just Mr. Brown's good additions.
Yeah, very good.
It will be institutionalized, I'm sure, and you can find that only in every interlocal agreement moving forward.
Good suggestions.
Well, oddly enough, there's actually some case authority that you can have an oral amendment to a written agreement that says you cannot. It's not totally clear.
Someone care to offer a motion regarding the interlocal?
I would move for approval of the interlocal agreement as amended.
Your second?
Thanks.
It's been moved and seconded. Those supporting the motion indicate so by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Motion carries and the interlocal is approved as amended. All right. Now that housekeeping chores are out of the way for at least today's meeting, we move to item number 7 on the agenda, and that would be an update of the downtown redevelopment project status. And I think Joe and Hopa are going to lead us through that discussion. So, gentlemen, welcome.
Well, thank you very much. Appreciate it.
How was that camping trip?
Hey, it was made a great sitcom. Actually, my advice is never try to put a tent up if you've never done it before in the dark with 3 small children.
Now, Joe shared with me a story yesterday about his camping trip with his family in the dark, and Joe's never been camping in his life.
I've been camping, just never put up a tent.
Okay, he camped with his horse.
Camping doesn't have to end up
Camping is not having room service.
Second floor.
But for the good of the order, I might offer, as we travel quite a bit, that if you're concerned about your seating, we might adopt the Southwest Airlines philosophy and have people respond to Donna, and the first one gets A1, A2, and then you can pick your seat based on your card. But anyhow, following the August 23rd approval by the City Commission of the resolution and directing LGC to move forward and the project, we've spent a lot of time doing a number of things. First thing we did is we sat down with the city staff. This is a very important project, and the importance of it really requires that we spend time up front putting things in place, processes, plans, schedules, working on approval processes and that path forward so that we can avert any issues going forward. I think the key to our success. Success is camping, actually. So looking forward, we do things into three basic areas. We heard from the approval of formal agreements, as well as the design development process, and then working on the funding commitments that are related to the public and private side. On the binding agreements, since August 23rd, we have been working with our attorneys. We first laid out a schedule of the types of agreements and a path forward that might be anticipated, and worked with city staff and their input on that general framework for how things would go forward, and then started by getting a draft master agreement with one of the projects. The idea is that if we're going to have, they need to be similar, so let's get one to a path forward and let's replicate that with the others. The initial draft of one of those agreements has been provided to the city. We've also been working on our agreements with our partners, with the folks at the Southern Independent Baseball and also with American Property Management.
So the initial draft dealt with
We'll start with the hotel. It has a lot of complexity to it, and the hotel and parking garage, and have provided that. And that's you will get input from the city and on that agreement. We laid forth a schedule that hopefully to get done within a 90-day window of approval of all of the agreements related to the project. And that's the foundation. So you bring all these things back together. Here's your schedule. Here's approval of your agreements. Here's your funding structure. Here's the timing of all that funding requirements, who does what, when, where, so that you can move the overall project forward in the first quarter of next year. Recognizing there's some design development work that needs to happen sooner rather than later, and how we deal with that process in this interim between the time of want to have a binding agreement and don't have one completely set down. The design development work, we have been working with the architectural firm. As you'll recall, we had a budget, and that budget was put together with some assumptions. So we started to refine those assumptions and then worked with the architect to cut the fees, and we're trying to create room up front now to make sure that the budget we provided is a match. How can we create room by reducing some of the fees of the different partners to make sure that we can achieve our goals and objectives from a financial perspective as well. We have also created a construction manager at risk process. You'll recall that there are a number of ways that you can deliver the projects. Remember, we have a hotel which is funded privately and is not subject to statutory requirements. There is a parking garage and the multi-purpose event venues which are subject to statutory delivery methods. What we want to do is say, because of the importance of this project to the community, we want all three of these to follow the same process. We want to suggest a process by which we would select a construction manager at risk to give us the greatest opportunity, the greatest amount of competition, people bidding on the project, and the success of it forward. So we have a framework that we have been working with the city on, and I'm certain that in the near term you'll be seeing some of that. There may be some decision rules and deciding point, policy point that this board may be involved in with respect to that process. We've also been working to bring on additional resources for ourselves. To deliver this project, it's not just going to be the folks that you've seen. There's going to be a whole lot of people who have to get this done. There's some folks we already had in-house. There's some folks that we need to bring on either by contract or on as a part of the staff. So we've been doing our interview. infrastructure manager and are working with them to bring on additional resources. We've had the opportunity to introduce some of those folks to the city and are moving those efforts. We have a number of other project management and support economic development folks that are going to be coming on board, and so that's in play. Additionally, we've been here a number of times to meet with city staff, and we've had meetings that arranged the city and DEI to talk about infrastructure, to start coordinating that process. Excuse me. And so there's been a lot of things going from an organization coordination process. Lastly, on funding, we've started the process for ED5. You'll remember that has a number of steps that need to take place to make that functional, as well as the new market tax credits. The new market tax credit program exists, as does the ED5. We anticipate there will be a consortium of CDEs, which are the organizations that provide the new market tax credits, and it's Civitas, who is the firm who is dealing not only with ED5 but also the new market tax credits, is working on bringing consolidating those entities to bring that to the table in the formal process. It's going to be a busy process, a busy time between now and the end of the year. A number of meetings that we're going to be in with you and with the staff to start laying out the agreements. Here are the major points of the agreements. Here's the responsibility. Here's the work that's been done before, meaning the selection of the architect through that process, meaning the work was directed to you by the city. And you're going to see a number of different folks coming in to finalize, bring all the infrastructure, all the planning, all the design, and the construction process forward. Our goal right now is to create a construction manager or a selection process for contractors that allows the greatest competition, allows for those firms who are local to participate in that, where they may participate in a piece who could compete with the selection process. If they didn't have experience on a multi-purpose event venue, a stadium, but they had experience in perhaps a hotel or a parking garage, then they could submit for one or multiple, and yet allowing to where we might be able to combine things. If you had a firm that had all the skills to respond individually, but we could group them back for some of the savings in purchasing and some of the savings in fees. So there's a lot of things that have been in play, even I think the duck analogy, smooth on top of the water, but we've been paddling quite a bit underneath the surface.
So is that construction manager to be across all three facilities?
I don't mean to get ahead of the city manager. What we have proposed, we thought about just that, having one construction manager do all three. Our concern was, because of the size of the project, that simply going out that way would eliminate the opportunity for a local contractor to participate in the process. It might also have just the big boys come in, and we might not see as much competition for the fees. So what we have proposed is to run three processes concurrently. One for the parking garage, one for the hotel, and one for the infill. It's a two-step process where first you do a selection of response, solicitation of qualifications, and then you get an RFP. Essentially, you could have one firm that could bid on respond to all three, or respond to one. Once you have your short list of 5 on each one of those, if you were shortlisted on more than one, you could respond to more than one. The RFP process, you could say, here's my fees and conditions if I get one. And if I'm selected for more than one, here's the pricing that I would offer. So you have the ability to have where you could end up with one firm.
Would you force that process-wise? Force them into making that kind of?
No, you're not forcing it.
Well, I mean, incentive. How do you make it clear that that is something that would be able to do?
You put it it's written in the RFP. And it's explained that there are three processes running concurrently. Each one is a two-step process. You're not prohibited from bidding on more than, or responding to more than one. You're not prohibited from responding this way to providing intended pricing if you were selected the RFP process to provide response to more than one. So it does not make it mandatory, but provide them the opportunity.
It makes it clear, though, that they have the opportunity to do that.
And that way you increase the opportunity for competition. You have more firms that could participate in that. That way, we feel we can get our best responses and best pricing for the project. There are differences in timing when these projects start, and there are issues you're trying to meld a number of different schedules. There are both pros and cons to both approaches. We feel this is the best means of giving us the overall flexibility to achieve a positive result.
You get all that?
It's actually the GC selection process, not the CM selection process.
Right, it's referred to as the construction manager at risk, the selection process for the general contractor, and that is a point.
I have to say there's a lot going on and a lot of discussion and a lot of the legal work that's going on right now. It's been pretty quiet. A lot of the work going on.
So, with nominal set of projects, there's some inherent complexities, at least at this phase. Everybody's on the board, everybody's dancing. Some of it is you take a step, I take a step, you take a step, I take a step. It's moving quicker and quicker each time we get the iteration of it. We've got some stuff we'll need to bring to you, hopefully today, some closed session, get some policy input from this body. Would echo what Joe and Melissa set up. The amount of work on your service is pretty incredible. Trying to get this to where you can pick the start dates or benchmark, or maybe more importantly in my mind, but today we open these improvements and figure out how we come backwards and make what's happening.
And that's the key on our schedule, is that we have to hit, for example, a stadium has to hit a specific day. You don't open in the middle of the season. And you have to work back from there for all your critical path points to make sure you can make that happen. And that drives when certain things have to happen to be able to make sure that you can meet those dates.
Is our lawyer involved in the process at this point?
Very much so.
In fact, lawyers have had called these meetings. We will be certainly giving you more updates as things move forward, but want to give you a quick summary. About as fast as that's possible.
No, I've heard you speak faster than
I said that.
one of those kind of meetings.
Jared, anything to add from the public side of the public-private partnership status report at this moment?
You know, at this point, other than just some peculiarities for either of us on the policy decisions on these agreements, the public side is the private side, and vice versa. So it's drivers in.
The only thing I would add is one of the reasons I started down this, I got distracted there myself. The hotel is not required to follow those selection processes. We're going to have all three of them follow the selection process that you would for a public project. The reason for that is that it is important, and I'll say this very slowly, it is important to make sure that we maintain the response or optics of the community so they can see it's a very open process, whether it had to follow that process or not. We're still going through the same methods to make sure we respect the public right.
Well, Joe, you also expect it to result in an appropriate and probably the best situation for the construction of the hotel. We cost standpoint as well. I mean, you're not giving up something as a result of going through the public process.
I think
other than time,
you are not giving up. You are subjecting certain things that would not have to be subjected to an open process, and that's not giving up something. You are making changes to that. It's not. It's a good thing because of the nature of the project.
Would it be difficult for a general manager making application to all these projects to have to make proposals when a couple of them require a public process and one doesn't? I'm trying to imagine that part wouldn't make any difference.
They do that all the time. They do. Those that do public and private work are familiar with when they have to go through this process or that. If it was a private process, there's a lot more negotiation it takes on. There are certain requirements for the public process things you can't do. This because of the possibility. Also, the benefit. One of the benefits is because certain contractors may want to do both. If you didn't have the public process on the hotel and you had meetings, then you could be accused of things, you could create a perception even if it's not true. This clarifies this path, I think, make sure that you're demonstrating an appropriate approach to the these projects.
Otherwise, you would have one meeting where you have to be public, and then you have to stop that, and you talk about your project.
Well, your selection process, you could negotiate. You wouldn't have the same parameters, and if it was the same contractors, then a conspiracy theorist would say, "Oh, see, you're behind, and you actually made this," and even if it's not true, and it certainly wouldn't be, people would want to level that charge if they weren't thinking correctly. So what we're doing is making sure that we can take that out ahead of time.
So are some legal advisors would say, unless you are required to do it, don't do it. I've heard that before. Mm-hmm. And you're saying the advantage of doing it even though you're not required to do is, number one, the public is able to see clearly, even though one is technically not a public partnership as the other two are. And then the second reason is the ease and ability to then discuss all three projects and perhaps move. Are there any downsides to using the public process on all three of these, even though you're not required? Or are there other positives to it? I'd just be interested in hearing, are there potential negatives of doing it?
I think because of the importance of this project and the confidence that you must maintain with the public, any downside that you may have are made up for by following the process. And so, rather than speaking any downside, I just think that anything is offset because from the get-go, we have said we want to have a transparent process where we involve the public. And in here, you are going through a process which is statutorily driven, and so you can maintain that confidence. And I think that outweighs anything.
From the cost standpoint, is there any difference or the potential of who you could get to come and do the project? Because the hotel project would be...
The way you deal with, there are more administrative issues, and Marcus astray, but in most public processes, there's a limit on the number of change orders before you can come back and have to have approval. There are certain bureaucratic things that come into play, administrative things that come into play just simply because it's a public process. And so from that standpoint, it adds a number of oversight and step processes that aren't present necessarily in just a purely negotiated deal. If you want to make changes, you don't have several time constraints. There's a difference on posting. If you go with the public process, you have to have it posted in the newspaper a couple of times, and you have to have a sealed bid opening. There's a number of things there that aren't required. And so from an administrative standpoint, that's the biggest hurdle.
It's typically the timing. You can move a little faster, but because of we're doing all three at the same time and going through that other process on the other projects, might as well do it in this one and we can address the issue. But typically it's a timing issue, and that usually translates to a little bit of cost, but it's not really significant enough to make an impact in this case.
Damn notices.
I was just thinking we'd get the newspaper to waive that.
That's money well spent.
Of course,
you don't want to leave the public and not knowing what's going on. I think that there's a commitment on the part of the city commission that this be public from the beginning. Well, and I would agree that that's the right thing to do. But you just never know. I mean, sometimes there are good reasons to do things publicly, but again, I've just been given advice before. Just if the law doesn't require you to do it, sometimes it's not a good idea to do it. So, but it sounds like that in this case, it looks like it's a win-win. Not only for the project, for the public, and actually for building a good project in a cost-efficient manner.
There's also some consistency. One of the benefits is if you have this process on this and these on that, and you have people responding, it's not that they don't know how to do it, but confusion potentially and people ask questions, well, I thought we were doing, well, which one are we doing that on? And so having consistency is a good thing. Jared, if I might to that.
The thing I looked at, the extra effort they're taking to include that part and parcel with the other two, the biggest thing that they are paying is a little bit of time. up front. Once this is put together, you're under the construction manager risk model, you're starting to move forward, you'll fundamentally not see a difference as you move into that point. So it's this piece that's solved. But we have to have that time regardless for the other groups, and sure see some merit, as y'all have said, and keep on,
Just look at the same, yeah. Anything else under the update item?
Any big surprises so far?
Nothing. Biggest surprise to your
Prescient, you're all knowing.
Well, I qualified that by saying not yet.
And not that you're aware of.
The biggest surprise was that I was able to actually put up a tent in the dark. That's been the biggest surprise so far.
Yeah, we still need to
You had a
verify that.
consultant, didn't you?
I did have a consultant from the next shop through over.
Okay, fair enough. We'll move on to item 8 on the agenda, which is a closed session. And so we will convene a closed session of the Amarillo Local Government
Mr.
Corporation.
President, can I ask, not necessarily a favor, but what your opinion would be?
you've done everything.
I put the public
Sure, we
forum
can do that.
before that, so that with the promise that there'll be no decisions made and they can vote on it.
Certainly.
Again, as a courtesy to you.
Okay, in order to accommodate those of you that are here, if anyone wishes to make any comments, we'll move to item number 10, which is the public forum section of the agenda. And it's the opportunity for public comment to be made to this body pertaining to the work of the corporation. So does anyone have anything to say? Yes, ma'am.
I just would like if you could go over
Can
the...
you please identify yourself?
Trina Fournier, 4427 South East. Anyway, you elected officers. I just didn't get them all written down. Can you tell me those again?
Sure. The secretary will be Donna DeWright, the city secretary for the city of Amarillo.
Okay.
The treasurer will be Dean Frigo. Assistant, now, I still don't have Dean's new title there. Assistant city manager for financial services. I'll learn those eventually. The vice president is Richard Brown. And I just serve as president. Or until I run out of office.
Okay.
Right? Anything else? Any other comments? Any other comments? Thank you, Commissioner, for letting us do that. It's a good idea. All right. So now we will convene a closed session and ask our guests if they don't mind leaving the room. For that purpose, the closed session is to discuss the potential sale, purchase, sale, or lease of downtown